Okay, welcome to King Speak. Today's topic is going to be, is divorce too easy now? Big topic because a lot of people are looking at it as though with the divorce rates going up 50 plus percent and anywhere from 70 to 80% being initiated by women, is divorce too easy now because of no fault divorce? It makes it so easy that you just have to decide that you don't want to be there, and then now you're going to get divorced. There's a bunch to unwrap when it comes to this. Now, you'll have on one side men saying that, well, you know what? I can love this woman. I can do whatever it is that she wants. And then she still can just decide one day that she's unhappy, take my house, take my kids, and take, half of all of my belongings, and including my retirement. And then she gets to live in the house with her new boyfriend, and he can raise my kids, and I'm paying for everything, including giving her alimony so she doesn't have to work and she can be a stay-at-home mom to the kids she creates now with him. It sounds pretty ridiculous, but women think that that's fair. Not all women, but most women will tell you that I was there with you, I was this, that, and the other. No, it's not really fair, and we'll get into that in just a few minutes. But in looking at no fault divorce, let's go into some of the reasons why it even, came about in the first place. The courts, because of all the number of divorces now, they're just getting clogged up with so many divorces. And then if you're trying to have to prove, why you should get this because this person was cheating, they weren't cheating, all the lies that people tell. And yes, people lie in court all day, every day. There's a rash of women who, lie about abuse, and which is not something you should ever lie about. But some, the ones who do it, quite often do it because they either want to make sure they get the kids and the house and get them out. And they don't necessarily care about the man anymore, therefore they don't really care what happens to them. And in no way, shape, or form am I saying that abuse doesn't happen. However, judges always have to look at it and they find that there wasn't any abuse. She didn't tell the truth. She got an injunction, got him out of the house, and now during the entire divorce, she's going to be in a house by herself, and now he has to try to find another place to live while he pays the mortgage, maybe even in full. Now, so what's happening is that the court said, we can't just, have everybody just fighting back and forth. We just have to make it so that if you want to get divorced, damn it, you can get divorced, and that'll just be it. It'll be no fault. So it doesn't make a difference whose fault it is. You get divorced, and the law says that we're going to split it this way. So they created, in the different states, not all states are no fault, but in those states, they, created a system where, it's just going to be, an equitable split, even though it's not really equitable. If you come in and you had stuff beforehand and they still made it part of the estate, because even a house that you had before then, the part of the equity that happens during a divorce in many, if not most states, becomes a part of the marital estate. So you end up having to buy her out of a house that you owned before her, even though she won't own half of it. She'll own whatever part the statute allows her to, claim as hers. So what you're looking at is that, men are looking at the fact that most of these women are the ones filing for divorce, and the man will stay whether or not, he is happy or not, whether the woman, stops having, intimacy with him, whether she stops caring for him, whether she stops cooking, whether she stops cleaning, whether she's going out, whether she's cheating. And most of these men end up staying and being miserable, but you can do everything that you, are expected to do as a man, and the woman still just decides that she's not happy. And she can leave, and even though she didn't specifically do things to earning this money, she can take it with her. So that's why you have a lot of men that are now saying, yeah, it's not really worth it to be married, because no matter what I do, she can just on a whim get mad at me and leave. If that wasn't happening in a lot of cases, a woman can call BS on it. But it does happen readily. And, you also have single women talking married women out of their marriages. You have single women pretending to be happy who really aren't happy, and talking women, into being miserable with them, while thinking that they're going to actually, get out of this marriage and then be happy. Then they realize they got out and they got tricked. However, a lot of these women are not willing to admit that they got tricked, that they were lied to, or that they even aren't happy anymore. But you do see a lot of them more than ever before online, being upset that the man has moved on so quickly, but you want to divorce him. What was he supposed to do? Sit there and be miserable because You left him. He was for a while, and then he was like, well, I can't do anything about it if she doesn't want me. The worst thing that, you can do, as a man or a woman is try to deal with somebody who doesn't want you. Because generally speaking, more men than women get that and just decide to move on. It's not to say that some men can't move on, that's true. But more men than women say, the hell with it. I can't make you want me. You don't want me, I'm going to move on. Okay, you go ahead and I'm just not going to think about you anymore, period. And then we ghost them and then they get upset when they get ghosted, which doesn't make any sense. If a person doesn't want you, I don't care if you're a man or a woman, you have to, find out how to not want them either and just be able to move on with your life. So what you have now is the ease at which a person, whether it's the man or a woman making the most money, and that other person deciding that they want to get divorced and leave and take whatever they want to take with them, deciding that, okay, it's time for me to go. And the law has made it easy in most states for that to happen. Now, there are some, little nuances in different states where, based upon, if you spent money on affairs or whatever, you can actually get that drawn back into the estate. But it's not really to get into all that because all those things are, case specific. However, what is happening is that you're having people treating marriage as though it is a temporary matter, not something that you're supposed to go in understanding that you really should try to make it for life and you need to make it work. At least try to make it work, okay? Because the impact on children, and families is not just your children, it's all family members. I mean, have you ever been in a situation where, you just really liked your uncle for marriage or your brother-in-law, whatever, and then your sister just screwed it up? Or, they end up getting divorced and, now, you're supposed to not deal with that person because your sister's mad, or, your brother's wife, cheated on him. And now you're like, oh man, I can't, deal with her anymore. And I really used to like her, but, she ruined the family. Or, the guy, he just, he cheated. Or, the female relative just lied on him so much that nobody can like him because she needed to not come out as the bad person. But whatever it is, now you have other family members who are supposed to be a part of this and not necessarily even take your side, but to support you by not dealing with them. Okay? So, when you have that, you then have to, try to figure out, what to do. And then the kids, you have, a lot of men who decided that, well, I'm not going to tell, the kids that the woman cheated, and then they find out later on that the kids hate him because she either implied that he was the one who cheated and just left them for no reason, or, allowed the kids to, be mad at him for no reason. So now you're finding out that you pretty much kind of have to tell the kids, if you're the person who were wronged, because if you don't, that other person may very well make you the bad guy or bad girl. So you kind of have to tell them. And now when you look at the modern view of commitment, the modern view of commitment is like, well, you know what? I think I love you. I think I can deal with you. We're going to be a team and we're going to, try to, do this thing. And you didn't go through the process of readying yourself to actually be committed to that person, right? So you'll have, it's far less likely in men because of the way that men view marriage. Men view marriage as something that, if they're not really ready for it, they really shouldn't do it because it can cost them a lot. Whereas with women, they don't view it the same way. They view it as though, okay, well, if it doesn't work out, then I can get out of it and I have all of these different safety features. All right. Not all women view it that way. So most understand because it is fact that the law is there to protect them, that, as fathers, when you speak to most fathers or you hear fathers online where you heard like, folks like celebrities like Deion Sanders say that, oh, my daughters could live there. And even Steve Harvey said, my daughters can come back to the house, but my sons can't. So males don't have that safety net, whereas the females do. So now what you're dealing with is one side seeing marriage one way and the other side seeing it another way. That's another reason why men don't leave as often, because of what you thought about it going into it, and you are more into, the responsibility of it than women are, because men generally see it more as a responsibility that you're taking on, because the law sees it that way. Now, I know that, some of you seen online where, the fact is that when it comes to marriage, the things that men want from women aren't things that they can get from a judge or from a court or from anybody, or the spouse who's leaving can't be forced to do. Some of the things that men want from women, okay, you want them to be loving, you want, to have sex with them, you want them, to clean up the house, you may want them to cook, you want them to, to be caring towards you, maybe rub your feet, massage you. Whatever it is, most of those things have nothing to do with things that a court can force them to do once you divorce, or even when you're separated. In a legal separation, have you ever seen a legal separation that says that the woman is going to come over, and cook for you, 3 times a week? They're going to come over and clean your house 3 times a week. They're going to come over and rub your feet. They're going to come rub your back. They're going to come in and mentally support you. They're going to come and be intimate with you. In exchange for that, you're going to pay for her to live in the house that you were living in, and you're going to pay, her a certain amount of, alimony during this time, or some type of spousal support. And then later on, when you're divorced, she's going to get the house. She's going to get a chance to have the kids, and she's going to actually get this amount of money from you. And, you have the responsibility of paying, insurance for her and all these different things. That's what's going to happen in exchange for her coming and doing those things. No, you've never seen that. Never. Because it doesn't happen. Because while a court can say, well, as the male, as the provider, you still have to pay for the house, or even if you aren't necessarily the provider, as long as you, have a job, or even if you don't have a job, there's still a minimum amount that they can order you to actually pay her during that time while the divorce is pending and thereafter. So it's very different. No judge can tell a woman, yeah, during this time and for the next 10 years, you're going to have to, in exchange for the alimony that he's paying, you're going to have to come and have sex with him. You're going to have to come keep his house clean. You got to make sure it's clean. That doesn't happen. And because that doesn't happen, you have a very lopsided contract. And just so everybody knows, marriage is a contract, right? It is a contract. And the third party beneficiary, and most people never thought about this, is the state. Okay, whatever state you're in, that is one of the reasons, the main reason why there is even child support. Child support came about, without getting into that, which I'll have a separate one on that. It's based upon a federal law that allows this to actually happen, and the states utilize their ability to not have to actually pay and make others pay for their citizens, because a state has their own purse strings. A state can enact laws in order to make sure that they don't necessarily have to pay for citizens. So what happens is that they don't want to have to pay for these children of divorce, so they make some male pay for it in most cases. And women may not like to hear that, but it's just the fact. There's far more men paying child support than there are women, and it's going to be that way for quite a long time. So because of that, they've come up with these laws to make sure that the states don't get saddled with all of this burden of paying for children. That's the reason why child support goes and tries to find these men. It's the reason why when you get, what used to be WIC, any type of state assistance, if they can find the father, they're going to find the father, and they're going to get that child support, and they're going to pay itself back first, and then pay the woman from there. So because of that, what you have is a situation whereas men are looking at marriage as, for the most part, and unfortunately, as a burden that they actually have to take on, and a situation where they can end up losing so much because they decided to marry somebody as opposed to, just dating them. So when men are looking at, marriage now, they're looking at facts. And you say, well, no, I'm different. Everybody says they're different. What a man has to do is look at it and determine if they really want to do it. And, I keep hearing about, there's studies that show that, after divorce, women end up, worse off than the man financially. What you have to understand about what goes into those studies, because I looked at them, and I looked at what the factors that they were looking at and how they formulated their outcomes. And what I kept seeing is that these studies were basically looking at, a woman now losing, for the most part, that level in society that came with being with that man. And also, even in situations where that woman was working to and even contributing, in virtually every case, even when it's supposedly 50-50, that man is still paying for most of the outside things. Okay, if you guys go to dinner, most of that is being paid for by the man. A lot of the ancillary things, being paid for by the man. So many different things are being paid for by the man. And then as a man changes his, situation from, being married to not married, he is fine with going, back down and getting a smaller place and kind of living the way that he needs to live in order to actually get back up. Whereas you will see online women everywhere like, well, I shouldn't be lowering my standards. I should still be able to live up here. But you want to be able to get that much money from the man and you continue to live up there, but you're not working for it or whatever. And now that man's standard is way, way lower because he is fitting the bill for you. And if you had kids, and trying to live himself. So you're so selfish to believe that you're supposed to be way up here and not the one working and paying for stuff. And he's supposed to be down there and you're just fine with that. It's okay. That doesn't really make sense. But because there's so many women who view it like that, now you have so many men saying that, should I really get married? Why should I do that? Because, divorce can come and then now I'm a part-time dad. I am paying for everything. And then everybody's looking at me like there's something wrong with me because I don't want to accept this, because I don't want to be a part-time dad, because, I don't want to be okay with being seen as less than and nobody caring about what happens to me. At some point in time, that has to stop. And until that stops, you're going to continue to have men looking at marriage in a negative manner. So, how do we actually change that? One of the ways of changing that is the laws need to catch up because it isn't fair. It isn't fair to have promises on one side that can be enforced by the court without there being promises on the other side that can be enforced by the court. And especially now since, we've gotten rid of the laws of necessaries. Now, don't really want to get into that, but basically what the law used to be is that there used to be a time when women couldn't get credit. They weren't responsible for anything. And in order to actually get anything, either their father or their husband actually had to sign for it. And men were held responsible for providing the necessary thing for women. All those necessary things, housing, clothing, food, water, shelter, all those different things, we were responsible for it. So that meant that in order for you to, if you had a daughter, you had to do it. If you had a wife, you had to do it. That's not the case anymore because women fought for the ability to actually go to work. Now you have the ability to go to work. It's no longer a choice. It is a responsibility. It's been too long society has allowed, women to not have to be responsible for things. And in deciding to choose, you also chose responsibility. So to a certain extent, it's not even, women's fault that so many of them believe that they don't need to be held liable or responsible for things because they've been allowed to not be responsible for things for so long. But it now has to change. And until that changes, the way that women view divorce and the number of divorces is not going to go down. It's going to continue to go up because if anything, the law is much more geared towards women than it ever was. Divorces are extremely easy to go by, and it does harm men more than women, notwithstanding what, they were talking about as far as how women are worse off financially. No, I mean, if you don't want to go back down, you just go to work and go down for a little bit and then come back up. All right. If you don't learn that you can't just spend, you don't have that type of money anymore. You just have to be like the man who is paying child support and can barely afford to live in a roach or rat infested place, but his kids live in a nice place. He has an old car. He's paying for, his wife's car, his ex-wife's car, that's much better than his. These things happen. But until the law looks at these things differently, you're going to get divorces that go up. However, what is starting to happen now is more men are putting the brakes on deciding to get married. They're putting the brakes on it because they realize that it is a much bigger decision than ever before because of the way that women look at divorce, the way that the courts handle divorce, the way that, so many women change once they actually get, that ring on their finger. Some don't even wait to marriage, But then once they say I do, so many change. And so many now view their husband as deserving so much less than the guys who did nothing for them. These women provide more intimacy. They're willing to do more things. We're not talking all women, but it happens in too many cases. They're doing things that the husband would love for them to do to them, and treating these other guys that they dealt with beforehand much better and in ways that their husband would love and would do anything to happen to them. But they view their husband as the person that they settled for because they couldn't get the man they want. In closing, on this topic, what I do want to say is that as men, please pay attention to, these women before you decide to take that plunge. If you do, more power to you. And for women, look at it differently. If you view a man as not being what you want, don't marry him. If you don't view a man as being sexually compatible with you, don't marry him and waste his time, because you're not going to treat him right. If you view a man as being less than what you deserve, or as treating you the way that you deserve, but you don't view him in the way that you should, a husband, don't marry him. And the same with men. If you can determine that this woman does not view you in the way that she should in deciding to marry you, don't marry her. All right. So, as always, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Take care.